Hey bosses, thank you so much for checking out this video. If you can do me a favor, click the subscribe button underneath the video and also tap the bell next to it. That'll make sure you get access to all the Invest Like a Boss videos as soon as they are available. All right, I want to welcome to the show. We're talking REITs, specifically RAD REITs and RAD Diversified, and I got a RAD guest on the show. We're talking to Dutch Mendenhall. He's the president and CEO of RAD Diversified. They got some crazy returns that I got to ask him about. But first, welcome to the show, Dutch.
What's up, brother? What's happening?
Not a whole lot. I really want to learn about what's going on with your business over there because it looks very promising. But first, why don't you tell me about yourself a little bit? Your team, when we were doing a little bit behind the scenes stuff, was saying that you have a really interesting background. I wonder if you can tell me about that. I did a little research, but I wanted to have a little bit of a surprise too. Maybe explain how your background got you into real estate investing where you're at now.
Well, when I was a kid, I started playing t-ball, and then I moved into little All-American football, and then I'm just kidding. So it depends on how far back you want to go. My parents were failed serial entrepreneurs, failed serial real estate investors, right? And so they would go up and down, and they would run the cycle like so many people who want to be a real estate investor, who want to be successful in real estate, right? And so that's kind of was like my upbringing, is going through like that journey of seeing my parents and seeing them invest in different things and seeing them struggle and seeing them succeed and then seeing them fail and then seeing them make money. And so myself, when I got older, I wasn't really wanting to get into real estate. I was kind of wanting to stay away from it. I was like, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to climb the corporate ladder. I'm going to work for the man. I'm going to, become a vice president someday.
Sure.
I'm going to wear a suit and go into an office every single day. And then that's just never what happened. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how hard I fought it, real estate kept just pulling me back in. And so I did my first flip about 15 years ago. And it was, the standard HGTV, you buy a house and you fix it and you put some money into it and you rehab it and you improve it and you make it better. And I spent a bunch of money going to real estate courses and real estate classes and, attending seminars and all of those kind of things. And one of the things I quickly realized that actually doing real estate is very different than HGTV or the TV.
Sure.
And it's very different than the real estate courses and the real estate seminars. Right. And so, I found some really good partners and we started flipping houses. And so that was kind of like my intro into the business was flipping houses. And then I got into investing into self-storage and apartments and got really big into that after the 2008 crash, right? Into the commercial short sales and to dealing with banks and working with banks and, analyzing their debt and being able to negotiate the debt and different things. And so over the years, we kind of just kept growing. And I started teaching and I started training. And in 2015, we had a bunch of students kept saying to me that Dutch, would you just invest with us? Would you just do it side by side with us? Would you just do it hand in hand? And in the beginning, I really didn't want the responsibility because it's like a lot of weight on your shoulders when you invest other people's money. And
Definitely.
I would always see these like seminar gurus that would be like, well, you go borrow your first, 200,000 in private money and tell your cousin and your grandmother that you want to borrow their money so you can go invest in a house. And I always said to myself, I always felt like that was a little like disingenuous. So you're telling someone you're going to go do something you've never done before, and you're going to go borrow their money to go and do it. And it just didn't, sit right with me. And so my students kept coming to me, and eventually, after talking with my wife and my business partners and my, mentors and people, different things, I said, all right, I'm going to start and open my first fund. And so we opened our first fund in 2015 and it made, pretty good money, and it was just the beginning. It was like a learning curve, like hiring accountants and hiring attorneys and all the different things with that. But then in 2016, we opened our second fund. In 2016, we opened our third fund. And so we had three of those, private equity funds, but then there was a lot of limits on the average day person, right? The normal person trying to invest, there was a lot of things that they weren't allowed to do. And that was kind of frustrating to me because I just said, look, if normal people want to invest, they should be able to invest in something like us that's getting good returns, track record, history, all of the things that you need to do to make it a good investment. And so that's when I began the journey with the REIT. And so I had to, do a deep dive into the lawyers and a deep dive into the regulations and the deep dive into the SEC, which is a whole another world of its own, right? And the funny part was the people at the SEC were incredibly helpful. Blew my mind from what everybody said, right? Everybody talked about the red tape and the government and everything else. Actually, they were really helpful. They told us what we needed to do. They told us how we needed to do it. And when we submitted our paperwork and we did our, financials with our auditors and everything else, they were on it. They'll go through you like a fine tooth comb, and make sure that like every I and every T is crossed, and they'll make sure that there's no room for, any craziness out there in the world. But once they've done that, right, and you follow their regulations, then you're qualified, right? And so we became qualified in 2019. Wow, it's funny when you talk about 2019 being years ago, right?
Right. It seems so long
It's like
ago.
yesterday, right?
So much has
But,
happened since then.
right, the
I
last year
can't
and a
think of
half,
any 2-year period where so much has gone down and
yeah.
changed in our lives. I love that, and I think that's why we really wanted to have you on the show, because all of our listeners, we call them bosses out there, they definitely want to get involved in a lot of investments, and they're not able to. So I think we're going to talk about that in a minute. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of the SEC related stuff. Can you just kind of give us a snapshot? Because, so much stuff has happened in the last 2 years. Let's take when you started in 2019, the real estate space, and where we're at now, going through an entire pandemic and now coming out of the pandemic. What's really changed in the industry that maybe is not so obvious to the average investor?
Well, there's a lot of things that have changed very, very quickly, right? So, there was a lot of turmoil, right, in the industry during that time. There was a time when lenders wouldn't lend to investors for diddly squat, and then they started lending again, and then they wouldn't lend, right? When you base your business off of buying foreclosures and buying pre-foreclosures and buying off the market properties and stuff, right? And then there are no foreclosures, that changes the industry as well very, very quickly. And so we had to make changes and shifts, fast. But I was a little bit blessed in the sense that I saw this thing as a pretty serious thing from the beginning. Like, I did videos in October of 2019 and said I thought there was some type of economic crisis coming quickly. And then as early as January, I said COVID is going to hit us like a sledgehammer. By April, I said there was going to be riots and protests. And I was able to make some of those predictions all along the way, because it's one of my evil geniuses is to be able to collect a lot of information and then correlate that information and then put it to work. And so we shifted our buying strategy towards bringing deals to us. And so we put a large outlay of advertising, marketing into bringing in deal flow. But then we also have thousands of investors who send us deals. And so we're able to sort through and kind of take the cream off the crop to do deals. But we also made an investment strategy shift. We started investing in income generating farms, right? And if you've paid attention to the news where people talk about Bill Gates or Bezos buying a crap ton of land, right? Well, if you own land and those guys are buying a crap ton of land, that's great, because it only drives up the price of valuation of your land, right? So that's when we started our Survivalist Project, which is a way to increase the income production on those farms, right? So I'll give you an example. Like, we bought a 454 acre farm, right, at $3,700 an acre, about a $1.5 million purchase, right? Now we've taken the income on that from about 105,000 a year to 244,000 a year. So more than doubled the income on it. But also with the growth in the valuations of real estate, that property that we bought for 1.5 million right now is valued at about 4.4 million. And so that kind of investing is something during COVID that we've paid attention to, like, hey, what's the challenge, right? What's the problem with what's going on in society? And where does real estate and where does property come in to fill that need, to fill that challenge, to fill that desire? Kind of our business was built off of the '08 crash. And so we, from the beginning, said, when stuff hits the fan, when stuff gets difficult, when the shit's really in the shit, right? When the suck's in the suck, like, what real estate makes money? And that's always been our primary focus.
Sure. So actually, that brings up a good point, because I wanted to ask you about this. You have all kinds of different property. There's residential, there's agricultural, like you mentioned. We've had a couple episodes recently on kind of the agricultural boom and kind of how tech's getting into that. So there's some exciting stuff in that space. You even have vacant land. And then you mentioned storage spaces. Sam on our show owns a ton of storage, self-storage units in Hong Kong. He loves it. It's like one of his favorite investments. So it's really cool that you're all over the place. But what specifically is the advantage to versus doing that versus just focusing on one individual sector, whether it be commercial, residential, whatever it may be?
Yeah, well, I think there's certain things that thrive. So my uncle, right, my old school uncle, he's like 85 years old, right? He said, Dutch, there's one thing that'll always make money no matter what. if you're in real estate, right? And he said bars. He said because people drink when they're happy and people drink more when
Yep.
they're sad, right? And I don't own any bars, right? But it was like a philosophy that stuck,
That might be next on the list.
right? That stuck in the back of my mind though was, what happens when stuff hits the fan? What happens when stuff gets difficult, right? And so, with the farms and the income generation behind the farms and stuff, we just found such a lucrative niche, right? And we figured out that not only could we take something that I'm great at, which is building business, right? And building businesses and those kind of things, but on farms, there's just so much opportunity, right? If
Right.
you take a 454-acre farm and you increase it by $1,000 an acre, right? You just increase the valuation of the property by $500,000. Now you start to scale that, right? We're under contract for a 2,000-acre farm. You take a 2,000-acre farm and you increase the valuation by $1,000 per acre, which isn't that much, right? What really isn't, not in the world we live in right now. You've increased the valuation of that property by $2 million. And so these are the things we're constantly looking at, where the margins and the money are and how we can leverage, and how can you use AI, right? To leverage, appreciation and understand where markets are going. So like one of the things with the pandemic is people, typically during a difficult economic times, they move into cities. They move where the population centers are because that's where where the jobs are. Well,
Mhm.
where is not the work and where is not the jobs now is in the cities, right? So we saw a migration to the suburbs, a migration out of the cities, which is very different than what you would normally see during a difficult economic time. And so that's something we began buying a little bit more of our suburban class properties, a little bit more suburban class income generation, right? But what's another thing that's in crazy need right now is daycares, right? People during this time, especially education daycares, because of the way school is and because of the way
Schools out.
schooling is. And so we own daycares. We own a funeral home. I mean, you think about, during a pandemic where an extra 600,000 people die in America, where's that at? And maybe that's a little bit cold, right? And people see that as, maybe a little bit cold, but at the same time, business is business. And
Sure.
you have to look at business from a non-emotional standpoint. And you have to say, like, what is happening in the world and where is the money going to go, right? And for me, I want to know those things at all times. And so like if you ever watch what's the show Billions, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and you talk about Axe, right? And Axe, when after the 9/11, right, invested shorted airline stock, right,
Sure.
in different things, right? And people want to judge that, and for me, it's just he's just taking, like, either he's going to do it or someone else is going to do it, but the opportunity is going to be there. It's kind of like when we buy a foreclosure property, right? Sometimes people want to judge us for buying foreclosure properties. Well, the government's going to foreclose on the property no matter what if it's a tax property. We're just simply buying the property, right? Or a bank's going to foreclose on the property no matter what, so we're going to buy the property. Now, we're not the one doing the foreclosure. So if they want to be mad at somebody, be mad at the government, be
Be
mad
mad
at
at
the
the
bank
bank.
who's doing the foreclosure. We're buying it after they've already done whatever they've done. And the best thing we can do is treat the people who live in the house or live in the property with respect, dignity, right? Give them an opportunity to buy back their asset, give them an opportunity to reestablish, to reignite their life, right? And so that's something we do. So if you watch some of our videos like on YouTube or different things, you'll see some of the homeowners that were in like pretty nasty conditions. Like this one woman, Joan, we bought her house and her roof was literally on her stairs was falling down, like falling down from the ceiling. And she's a 70-year-old woman and she would literally have to crawl up her stairs, right?
Oh,
To
awful.
get to the second floor of her house, right? And so, we were able to buy the property and then we were able to put it in great condition, right? And the fascinating thing is after we got a chance to talk with her kids and different things, who weren't helping her financially, who weren't helping her with different things. Now suddenly their mom's in a better living condition and they want to help, right? And different things. And so we were able to establish a rental relationship, a landlord relationship, right? And give her way below market rent, right? To be able to live in there. Whereas we were able to go in and make the bathroom handicap accessible and put, just a railing on the staircase. And obviously we fixed the ceiling and the other things to make the property, in a good livable condition. But these are the kind of things we do when we see, the window open, we'll walk through the door.
Sure. That's great. For some of our listeners that maybe aren't familiar with the process, a lot of your purchases seem to be tax property sales. Can
Yeah.
you tell us about how those work and what kind of advantage that they offer you to get a better return on the property?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple advantages to tax sales, right? It's one of the for me, I found it as one of the better ways to buy real estate from a discount, right? From a cheaper standpoint.
Sure.
Essentially someone doesn't pay their taxes. They don't pay their real estate taxes. And if they don't pay their real estate taxes, eventually a county, a city, the government will foreclose on the property. And so then we'll buy the property at foreclosure, right? And now that's called a tax deed. There's also tax liens where the county or the government will put a lien against the property, and you can actually buy the lien, and then they have to pay you on the lien instead of paying the government, right? I'm typically more of a tax deed kind of person because I like to own the
You want
property. I
the
like to,
property.
yeah, I want the asset. And so for me, in those situations, there's some complicated parts to that make it a little bit, more difficult with title and with legal and how do you deal with the people living in the property and redemptions and those kind of things. But essentially, the government will establish a lien, they'll foreclose on the property, and then we'll buy the foreclosed property from the government. And
Sure.
so
So
from there,
are a lot of these maybe longtime homeowners that just fell behind on payments, or some of them are maybe
no,
a flip gone bad, or what's kind of
no,
the average situation you see?
I mean, sometimes, but I mean, the typical situation, there's usually like one of three reasons, right? First reason we see more often than not is addiction, right? We see people with addictions who don't pay their taxes, where the addiction becomes more important, right, than paying the
Sure.
taxes. A second thing we see is we see homes that have fallen apart, right? There's nobody living in them. There's holes in the ceiling. There's holes in the roof. It's an absolute disaster, right?
Essentially abandoned properties, or
Yeah, abandoned properties you see a lot of times. Like that's the only thing that triggers something to be done with them, right? They get abandoned and there's nothing else that stops them from staying abandoned. Eventually a tax sale will trigger something to happen with those properties, so it keeps, you know in the rougher neighborhoods you'll see more and more abandoned properties. The only thing that eventually has something to be done with that property is a tax sale. It's the only stopgap. Third
so
thing
are
is you
a lot of a lot of the properties you're looking for probably more focused on lower income neighborhoods?
I'd say for us, we don't focus on just lower income neighborhoods, right? So we try to hot map. We use AI, right, to hot map our
Okay.
cities to understand valuations. Those of you don't know what I mean by AI, artificial intelligence, right? So we use computer systems and different things to know like where our value's going, right? If you can buy in a low income generating neighborhood that's going to appreciate 5% per year, right? That really doesn't do me any good. But
Mhm.
if I buy in a transitional neighborhood, what I call gentrified, right, low income neighborhood, they might appreciate 30, 40, 50% per year. And so
Sure.
that's kind of where our focus is where's the gentrification happening? Where is the transition of the neighborhoods? Where are people who've owned a property that's been worth, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 for 30 years, and now it's suddenly worth 300,000, right? And I know 2 years from now it's going to be worth 500,000, right? Where am I catching those transitions? Where am I catching? I call it, like there's a Mississippi River, right? I just need to throw the net out and catch the fish, right? So I have to figure out where is the river headed? Where's the river going?
Awesome. I'd love to see kind of some of the newer tech kind of implemented into some of your strategy here.
Yeah,
Let's talk about who.
some of my guys that have been with me for years and years. So I used to actually coach college baseball.
Okay, cool.
And that was kind of like before I got into business, got into a career. But then about 6 years ago, like when I got to the business to a really good place, before I had my kids, I coached college baseball for another 2 years. So some of those guys now still work for me
Oh,
after they
nice.
left college and different things, right? And they work for the company. And so, but now they've been going to school and they've been that's exactly what they're going to school for: the statistical research, the artificial intelligence, some of the different things, because we want to be on the cutting edge of evaluation, right? Buying good real estate's all about being able to evaluate the situation, evaluate the deals better than anyone else to know where the values are going to climb.
Love that. So we teased it a little bit earlier, but let's talk about who can actually invest with you. First off, do you need to
Okay.
be an accredited investor to get into RAD Diversified?
You do not need to be an accredited investor. You can be a non-accredited investor to invest with RAD Diversified. And that was a goal for us because funds that open up that only allow accredited investor is actually pretty easy. You can pay a lawyer about $10,000 to become what's called a Regulation D private equity fund, right? And that's fairly easy to do. You don't have to become SEC qualified. You don't have to do, all of those kind of requirements. You don't have to get an auditor. You don't have to have accounting and those kind of things. And that's what we did with our first funds, which was the original investment funds we opened up, where our investors invested money. We opened the funds, we paid them back their money. We opened more funds. We did the same thing, right? Over and over. Become a fund like ours to allow non-accredited investors and to be able to publicly advertise and have non-accredited investors invest with us. We have to go through all the SEC qualifications. we have to become a licensed, what's called Regulation A fund, in order to do that. And so we're very proud in that we're allowed to take the average everyday person who wants to invest, allow them to make the kind of returns that usually only accredited investors can make. And we've been able to open that door for them.
That's great. I know our bosses are going to be excited about that. There's the biggest complaint we get about any guests on is, I love this. I can't invest in it because I'm not accredited. So we try to get as many investments on as possible that you don't necessarily have to be accredited to participate. Also, kind of on the same note, what about investors outside the United States? Do you accept any of those in?
Yeah, we have a number of Chinese investors in our fund. It's interesting. One of our first investors that came to one of our retreats happened to be Chinese. He's like this 22-year-old kid who pulled out a large stack of cashier's checks and invested with
Nice.
us. And for the first 3 years of our fund, he was actually the largest investor in the
Wow.
fund.
At 22.
Yeah, at 22, I think it was family money, right? I
Sure.
think he was involved in like government things and different things, right? And so, but he's still an investor today with us, 7 years later. And but over the years he's referred different investors, and so we've gotten fairly familiar with Canadian investors, Chinese investors. We have a number of investors from Mexico, right? I mean, I think we can bring in investors from anybody as long as we do our basic homeland security checks and different things on them. They'll be just fine.
Okay, great. So maybe just a couple more steps, but pretty simple process.
Yeah.
We
I
got
mean,
bosses all over the world, so they want to know. They're like, we want to get in on this good American stuff too.
yeah, we've been through quite a journey to do this the right way,
Awesome.
and so
Sounds good.
it's important to me that we pay attention to what's going on in the world and what the reality is of investing, right? And make that open. And so I think we're traditionally primarily we have more Americans, right, invested in the fund
Sure.
than anywhere else, but I think we've always had that influence. One of our directors is actually, his name's Alan Pan, and he's a Chinese Canadian, right? And he's our director of international investment. So he actually deals with our international investors and working with them and stuff, and making sure that they're able to get their money, because it's not always easy for them to get their money into the US either. Sometimes they've got to
Yep.
transfer money to different banks or do it in different ways.
Cool. On a kind of related note, are all your property assets inside the United States?
They're all US based.
Great.
I believe
So it
in
seems like
American companies owning American real estate. Even if
There
there's
you go.
foreign investment, it's
But
still
we
American
want the
companies
foreign
owning.
investors in there too.
We do. It's the perfect thing.
So it seems like you're really inclusive, which we love. What's the minimum investment to get started with RAD?
It's $1,000.
Just $1,000. Awesome.
Yeah, it was 50,000 for years. And then as we made the transition with the non-accredited investors, and we started working with more of the general public, right, not only referred investors, then we made it more available to people.
Great. So how can investors expect payouts to come? Is it quarterly, annually, some other type of term? And how do you determine payouts to investors?
Well, as a REIT, you have to pay out 90% of profits every single year. It's to keep your REIT status, your tax status with the federal government. You have to do that. But for us, we have kind of a different philosophy. We have investors like my mother-in-law was one of the first investors with us all the way back in the day.
You listen to your guru.
What?
You listen to your guru, I said earlier when he said.
Yeah, right. Very true. Very true. I'd already flipped a few houses at that point, but yeah. And so she came to me at one point and she said, Mijo, I want to make sure to invest, I want to get an extra income of $500 a month. Right. And so she had invested with us, and she had originally invested $40,000 with us. Right. And so we looked at the returns and looked at different things. And so we started sending her a check for $500 a month. And now, all these years later, her investment's grown from like 40,000 to 90,000, over 7 years, but she's still getting her $500 a month check. And so we kind of decided that was something we would make available to any investors, right, that want to have that recurring income, that supplemental income and different things, that if they say they invest $100,000 with us, right, and they come to us and they say, well, I'd like to get an extra $1,000 a month in income, then we go ahead and distribute that $1,000 to them every single month, and then adjust their capital account accordingly based on the returns and based on what their payouts are. Otherwise, we do what's called, we do quarterly evaluations where the stock price changes every quarter. So our stock price is not, it's a public REIT, but it's non-traded, right? And so the stock exchange doesn't affect our REIT price. The government policies don't affect our REIT price, right? Elon Musk saying something about, the Bitcoin he bought last week doesn't change our stock price, right? And so it's based on asset value and cash flow. And so that's a pretty cool part. And so we were able to do that for investors. Otherwise, then we do every 6 months we do a distribution. So that's how we do it.
Great. So it sounds like a few different options, but if someone wants to cater um, a certain cash flow coming
Yeah.
in every month or quarterly or however they want to do it, they're able to negotiate that with you.
Yeah. It's not so much a negotiation as they stating what they want and us providing. See, one of my things that pissed me off early on when I talked to different investors and stuff, they were just always concerned like they couldn't get their money out, right? I think that's an investor's biggest fear is like they put their money in and then they never get it back, right? And so for us, we made the decision that like we wanted to give them multiple avenues to be able to receive not only dividends, but also to be able to receive cash flow, also to be able to withdraw if they need to. And for us, it's all about comfortability, right? I learned a long time ago, it's one thing if I make investors money, which I've been doing my entire adult life. But it's the second thing that if I can give them a great experience, if they can be treated well. In America today, too often people are treated not the way they should be treated. Like you're going to invest my money with me, you deserve respect, you deserve my gratitude, you deserve my appreciation, right? And you deserve your money. And so these are things that I found that make investors happy and differentiate us from other companies out there. Like one thing during COVID, like I go to a hotel and I get less service, right? I rent a car and I get less service, right? I go to a restaurant, and this isn't the restaurant's fault, but these are the rules and regulations. I go to a restaurant and I'm forced to eat outside, or I'm forced to order on an online app, and a server doesn't want to talk to you in person, right? And so one of the things
remain the same, and
or go up, or go up,
yeah,
or go up, or go up.
Exactly. We see that in airlines too. Oh, the flights have been awful lately.
And I said to myself, I said, look, us during COVID, we're going to get better. We're going to do better investing. We're going to do better customer service. We're going to go to another level. We're going to take care of our investors better. So like
that brings up a good point. I want to ask you too. So what you're saying is there's no fixed investment term. One of our Patreon members, actually, I want to give him a shout out too. Jeff Holmes wanted to ask this too. He just wanted to know what type of fees might occur if you got out early, or what the terms are. I know a lot of these investments we talk about, there's a minimum, whether it be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Usually there's an option to get out, but there's a penalty associated with that as well. Can you speak to what your process is at RAD?
Yeah. So the longer you stay in, the better it is for you, obviously. But what happens year one? So if you invest $100,000, and let's say we make a 20% return year one, and so you make $20,000, so you would get 96% of that year one of that $20,000 return. So you get over $19,000 on that return. Then year two, you get 97. Year three, you get 98. Year four, you get 99. And year five, you get 100% of your returns, right? And there's small micro fees if you withdraw early, right? The REIT is a long-term investment, right? This is not Bitcoin trading, day trading, right? Type of investing. You're investing in a real tangible asset, real property, right? So it is a little bit more of long-term. At the same time, I've had investors come to me during COVID, during this last year, numerous different times. And they're like, Dutch, I have an emergency, right? My mother is, not my mother, my mother-in-law, right, is in the hospital, and my wife is asking me to help, right? And so those are different kinds of situations where we just seek to get people their money as fast as humanly possible, to take care of them as fast as humanly possible, because those are emergency stuff, right?
Sure.
And we
so essentially 4 years you're fully vested without penalty of withdrawing. Other than that,
correct.
It's 1%, I guess, per year lower. So 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, only 1% of your returns, right? So so you still get
returns, not your full investment. Okay,
not your full investment. Yeah,
gotcha. Okay,
got it clear.
Totally reasonable. So that makes sense. I just want to get that clarified for everybody.
Just trying to get the bosses. I don't need the bosses not being bosses.
I know, right? Got to stay bossy over here. So how does it work with investor money? Is everything going to one large fund, or do you have funds broken out? Like you said, you have agricultural properties, you have residential, you have commercial, you have self-storage, whatever it may be. Are they broken up into separate funds, and someone could allocate, I want my money to go to agriculture, or I want 50% here, I want 50% residential, or is that all?
No, it goes into one diversified fund. That's why it's RAD Diversified, right?
Sure.
And so, and though it kind of, the way you're saying it kind of sounds like we're here or here or there. No, we have like very concentrated focuses, right? So we have our income
No,
producing.
I'm sorry. I meant the investor would say, I
No,
want it here, here,
I
here.
meant
But
more
yeah,
for them, right? So
sure.
they understand. So
Yep.
on the one hand, we have our income producing farms, right? On the other hand, we have our opportunity sectors with our income producing properties, right? And so we try to stay very, what we do is very, to me, is very simple. We take an asset, we add value to it, we increase the value of the asset, and we do it over and over and over. We found through the concentrated effort in our income producing farms and our opportunity properties, right? That concentrated effort is like a compounding effect, right? We've all heard of compounding interest, but when you're concentrating in these specific areas, there's a compounding effect on top of the compounding interest where you just get better, right? Your staff, your team get better, your acquisitions teams get better, your financing gets better, right? Like years ago when I first started, I was borrowing money like 10, 12% with points on the dollar and everything else. Today I borrow at like a 3%, right? With maybe 1 point on the dollar. And so we're getting money cheap. And a part of that's just our scale and the ability from the concentrated effort.
So, what happens if the offering gets fully funded? I think the maximum used to be 50 million. I think it recently went up through the SEC.
Yeah, it went up to
Obviously, you know
75.
better than I do, but
Mhm.
whenever you filed, what's the maximum amount allowed in the fund, and do you have another offering available afterwards that you're planning on, or can you just give us some insight into how that works? Where I know we've had other companies on that somebody wants to do it, and then 3 months after we air the show, the offering's fully sold out and you can't get in. So where what do you see with that and the RAD fund?
Yeah, I mean, I do think we'll fully vest, right? I think we'll fully sell out from a stock price. Our goal from there is to open another REIT, right? And to take that REIT and grow that as well. But right now, the primary focus is to take the current REIT, to take the current capital, the current money, keep investing it effectively, keep investing it smartly, take care of our current investors, right? And we'll allow what happens after, right? Is to take care of the people who invest now. And for me, sometimes I think too often people worry about what doesn't exist, right? And for me, it's always about what exists now. Maybe that's an old, be present mental mindset, right? But for me, that's what's important is I got to take care of the people that exist with us now. And so that's just one of our philosophies.
That makes sense. And since we're talking about the SEC, I should bring it up. On your site, you had mentioned that you filed for a COVID-19 amendment that
Mhm.
guarantees a 5% minimum payout. Can you explain what that's all about and how it works?
Yeah. So, I saw a lot of REITs out there who froze new investments, who froze withdrawals, right? When COVID hit. And we didn't do any of that, right? We paid out more money in 2020 than we've ever paid out in the history of our company, right? We made more new investments in 2020 than we ever made in the history of our company. And I know this year in 2021, we're going to do the same. And so for me, I wanted people not only to feel comfortable, but I wanted to guarantee it. And so we backed that by doing an amendment. And I think we're the only company that I know that's a registered fund with the SEC, right? That did a COVID-19 amendment for a guaranteed distribution. And it was our wanting our investors not only to feel comfortable, but not just to feel comfortable, for us to put our backing, to put our guarantee behind that. And the SEC was kind of hard on that, right? They wanted us to prove that we had the assets to back the guarantee, right? They wanted us to guarantee the guarantee, right?
Sure.
As guarantors on it. And so it actually took more effort than we thought it was going to do it. But I'm glad we did, because I think we achieved 36.7% return last year. So the 5% distribution, right, was fairly easy for us to do. But I wanted our investors to feel that comfortability.
Sure. So can you explain what that guarantee covers and how long that would stay in effect till?
Yeah, so we're reapplying for that guarantee in 2021, right? And our plan is to offer that guarantee. It might not no longer be a COVID-19 guarantee, but our plan is to continue to offer that guarantee going forward as a part of our REIT.
So the guarantee is 5% annually, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just want to clarify that.
Yeah,
And then
which everybody told us we couldn't do. And it's always funny, like when the world tells you you can't do something, I'm always, well, let's look into that more, right?
Oh, I'm
Let's
the same
research,
way.
let's research that more.
There's
Let me
always a
dive into
way.
that a little bit more, right? And so, because I wanted to offer a guarantee, and our first lawyer said, well, Dutch, the SEC is not going to let you allow you to offer a guarantee. I said, well, where's the regulation on that, right? Where's the law? Where's the statement on that? Well, he isn't there. There isn't one. they just kind of frown upon it. I said, well, if there's not a regulation, there's not a rule against it, and I want to offer my investors a goddamn 5% guarantee, right? Let me offer them a 5% guarantee. Pardon my French, everybody, but like I get passionate about like professionals who like tell you can't do something you can do, right?
Sure.
I get passionate about people who say I can't take care of my people when I want to take care of my people, right?
Yeah, it's
And
the
so it's
old,
just kind of my fire.
they didn't tell me I couldn't not do it. So
Right. And so and here's the thing, the crazy part was, and like the lawyers totally wanted to keep us as the investment company, the founders, right? They wanted to keep us separated from the SEC, right? And eventually I said, look, man, call the SEC and I want to be on the phone call, right? And he got on the phone, he called the SEC and he was talking to him, and I said, and then I just, piped in, which he didn't want me to talk, right, during the call. I piped in, I just asked the question. I said, well, can I offer a 5% guaranteed distribution? And the person with the SEC, very, very helpful, right? He said, yeah, Dutch, you can. Like there's no regulation that says that you can't do that, right? And so like it's funny what sometimes like is the law or what the lawyer wants to tell you it is, but what the actual reality, what the truth is, right? And so for me, I always believe like in transparency, realism, and truth, right? That's like a motto of our company. Is we'll be transparent about everything we do, and we want to keep it real with you. And then also we're always going to keep seeking the truth. And so for me, that's important because I want to be the vehicle where the everyday person, the working professional, people that are in the business every single day, that they can invest, they can make money, right? And they can feel safe and comfortable doing it. And it's not about, it's fascinating. I was reading other offers, right? And they're trying to raise money for a business that's going to be, angel investing, right? And like my mindset is like, I don't angel invest, I invest, right? And there's nothing wrong with angel investing, but it's just not my mindset. My mindset is a real tangible asset, something I can touch, feel, I can taste, and that produces income. Because it's not like I hear this commercial on the radio all the time, and I'm like, man, it scares the shit out of me because the radio on the commercial says all the time, they say 600 million in undeveloped real estate, right? It's a commercial. And I'm thinking to myself, 600 million in undeveloped real estate to me sounds like a ticking time bomb, right?
Sure.
It's like, I believe in income producing, developed real estate that makes money and can make more money and continue to make money. That's just my mindset, right? So
yeah, totally. So you've told us how we as investors make money. So the question is, how does RAD Diversified make its money? What are some of the management fees? Are there any other fees outside of that investors should be aware of?
yeah, absolutely. So we make a pretty standard fee structure, 2 and 20, right? It's just like the Billions, right? If you ever watch the TV show, right? Same rates they went by. It's a pretty standard industry term. So it's 2% of management fees and then 20% profit share. So 80% of all profits go to our investors, 20% come to us as owners of the REIT.
Yeah, it seems pretty standard. One other thing, investor wise, this comes from our Patreon member Pete. He wants to know, what does RAD Diversified provide investors tax wise at the end of the year? Do you get a K1, a 1099? Is there separate forms for each fund, which we've already answered that, I think, because you're just one large fund? And can investors just expect one easy tax form, or is it a little bit more complicated than that?
No, it's one.
Personally, I just filed my taxes, so this is already giving me a panic attack.
Right. I mean, I think it gives everybody a panic attack, right? I hear it all the time. It's not a K1, right? That's if we were a normal Reg D fund, right? It's simply like you invest in stocks, right? Well, when do you pay taxes if you invest in the stocks? Is if you withdraw from the stock, you pay taxes on the dividends or the returns, right? So at the end of the year, you get one simple tax form, right? And it's only based on, if you withdraw and when that withdrawal would make a profit. And so it's fairly simple in that way.
Cool. I'm just going to give you a chance to brag now. So in 2019, according to your site, RAD Diversified did a 44% return and a 36.7% return in 2020. And that's obviously with COVID happening as well. What are you seeing now, and how can you maintain these insane gains? And why wasn't I called in 2019 to invest?
Well, I didn't know you in 2019, but I would love to have called you. It's fascinating, right? Thing a lot of people don't understand is that first year, it's always very easy to open up the fund and make good returns, right? Because you don't have any equity to balance against. And so when I buy a property and I make 30% equity, or I buy a property and I make more than that, it automatically all goes to the bottom line, right? But then year two is when the real stuff starts to get busy, right? And you start to get very serious about, these are your returns. And then year 3, then year 4, right? Things start to balance out, right? And so for me, 2021 looks really good. What we're doing with the income producing farms, what we're doing with the Survivalist Project is something that I think no one else in the real estate world and real estate industry is doing, right? And we're increasing our cash flow, which is the basis of my business is cash flow, right? I mean, equity is great and valuation of equity is great, but that's a number that people choose, right? Appraisers choose it, valuators choose it, and those kind of things. Cash flow is cash flow. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter like what somebody else sees the value of something is. Cash flow is cash flow. And so the cash flow we're producing with the Survivalist Project is off the charts, right? And so
Can you
for
go
me,
into that Survivalist Project a little bit more? I was a little unclear how that works.
so we buy these income producing farms, right? And they're producing good income. And I'll use we have one farm in Idaho. It's 454 acres. When we bought it, it was producing 105,000 a year in income, right? Since then, we've been able to take the income from 105,000 to 244,000 a year in income. And so we've been able to massively increase the cash flow. But here's what it is. And so we keep running our farm on it. We keep producing the income on it. We keep the standard stuff is. But then we started increasing the income through other sources. And so like we added a quarry to the property and we've added other things. But the cornerstone of that is we're building an escape plan, a plan B, right? If the proverbial shit hits the fan, right? And everybody thinks, well, nuclear bomb, right? Well, if that happens, well, I don't really think that's something so much to be scared about. But when you start talking about electrical grids going down, you talk about China has a 40-year plan to overthrow capitalism, and we're 25 years into that. You talk about artificial intelligence surpassing human intelligence as a superior intelligence on our planet, right? That's happening right now. The old Terminator, intelligence thing is actually real today, right? If you believe that the pandemic was if you believe the pandemic was planned, if you don't believe it just happened, right? You're talking about trillions of dollars, not billions, not millions, trillions of dollars between the testing, between the creation of the vaccine, between the actual taking of the vaccine, right? And what people pay for that, what the insurance companies, what the government's paying, right? You're talking trillions of dollars. If you don't think that's planned, then you're not me, okay? Because I do believe there was a test that was done. I do believe there was an experimentation. We have certain members of our survivalist community that are in special operations, special forces within the military who've said to us, "There's another pandemic coming." Right? They have no doubt that in the next 4 to 5 years, that another pandemic's coming. And my belief is the next one might be worse, right? And so these are all things that people want a plan B, right? Most people don't have $500,000, $1 million to build their own bunker, right in the middle of a mountain, in the middle of nowhere, right? Kind of shelter. And so what we did was we produced sustainable income producing farms that if the shit ever hits the fan, they have a place they can go to. And so for $200 a month, people have a place they can go to, right? And so this is something we built, and then people have been doing it, and it just caught wildfire. It's like I was doing different podcasts, and I was doing different like real estate clubs and stuff, right? And people would hear about the survivalists, and they wouldn't want to talk about tax liens and tax deeds at all. All they wanted to talk about was survivalists. And so our income production from that has continued to grow. And the worse things get, the more people buy into it. And so that you understand the survival industry was a $75 billion industry last year, right? The year before that, it was a $25 billion industry.
Sure. You got me going down a rabbit hole now that you mentioned this. So you have one of these properties you said you started, right?
We did our first property, right? Okay. But we have multiple properties now.
Sure. So and
454 was our first one, and then we have 800 in New Mexico, and then we have other. We just have. I don't tell everybody about every single property, but
no,
we have
fine.
multiple properties throughout the country.
But you're able to essentially get a subscription service out of these people.
Yeah.
Essentially, right now. Okay.
Yep.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and and it's cool stuff. I mean, we have electrical grid, sustainable water. Like one of our properties is 2 miles of riverfront, right? We create storage on the property so people can send things that we store at the properties for them. So there's just different resources. We usually have cattle and farm animals on every single property. So my first time I bought 10 heifers, right? I was like I don't know if heifer is like a PC word or anything. And that's what they actually call a pregnant.
You said it, I did.
They actually call a pregnant cow, right? A pregnant cow is actually the real name of it's a heifer, right?
Sure.
It's like the name for a female dog is an inappropriate word to say on a podcast, right?
Right.
Well, a pregnant cow is a heifer. So
Sounds good. So you kind of seem like a guy that's seeing these trends, excuse me, in advance. I think this is very interesting. I definitely want to learn more about this down the line. Is there somewhere to check out more about the Survivalist Project online? Do you have a site? Is it kind of a members only type deal, or how does this work?
If somebody really wanted to check out the Survivalist Project, our website's actually americansurvivalistproject.com. Okay. But also on our RAD Diversified website, they can go there as well. One of my staff or teams here is trying to tell me something. What? Yeah, and on Facebook, it's the Survivalist Project.
The Survival. We'll put all this in our show notes as well.
Yeah.
And obviously RAD looks very interesting, and especially since you added that little dynamic there as well.
Well, I was
generating some more cash flow. I mean, it sounds
it's fascinating. My wife came to me and she said, sweetheart, I feel like we need a plan B, right? California is crazy. I don't judge people who get vaccinations, right? But I'm not a super pro vaccination person, right?
Mhm.
And I know that's very controversial in today's world, but I also believe in our own medical rights. I believe if you want to take a vaccination, you should have the medical right to do it. And if you don't want to, you should have the medical right not to, right?
Sure.
It scares me when every vaccination out there has nanites in it, right? Like every sci-fi horror movie I ever watched in my life, and they start talking about nanites and putting little robots in the body of every single human being that's going to change their DNA, literally scares the living bejesus out of me, right? And I know that's not for everybody. A lot of people, they want their life back. I know you're vaccinated, right? And so
yeah,
I think
you're talking to a robot right now.
What?
You're talking to a robot right now, Dutch.
Talking to a robot right now, right? And so for a lot of people, I think it's great, but I think you should have that right to make that choice,
Sure.
right? And so my wife is very much a believer in purity, right? And so she believes in the pure food, and she believes in ability to natural health and boosting the immune system and other kinds of things. And so she said, I feel like California is going to force us to vaccinate our kids. We need a plan B, right? And I'm like 50-50 on, right? Because part of my science brain says vaccination makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
Right. And then the other part of my brain, in the pure health and the not putting anything into our body, which is kind of our philosophy, right? No pharma into our body, right? Is kind of one of our pure beliefs. It's almost like a religion to us, right? In our beliefs. And so then they kind of go like this, right? And so, but then I said, I just want to have the right either way. And so she said, we need a plan B. And she goes, I also think with these riots and protests, they were, very scary to her. And so I said, well, you know what, let me just create a plan B, right? If the actual worst proverbial shit hit the fan, right? Let me create a plan B. And so I went and bought the first farm. And then every relative and every single person I knew said, well, Dutch, I want to be able to come too.
Yeah.
And then our investors, like, as I shared it with them, they all said, I want to come too, Dutch. Like, let's do more of this, right? And because we have our inner circle for people who invest, anybody who invests more than $50,000 with us, we put them in an inner circle. It's like an elite investing group, right? It's a hangout.
I was just going to suggest you should offer a spot at the farm for a certain level investor,
right? And so we have that club, right? We have that club just because I've gotten as much from that club as they've ever gotten from me, right? The minds of people, their minds, like I crowdsource, right? And so as much as I can pull, their minds to it, it's really helpful. And so they wanted more, and so then we bought a bigger farm, and then we allowed other people to join us. And then it just kind of started to tumble and catch fire. And the crazy part is the more people that join, the more money we can put into making it a better community, a better farm, right? Like when I first bought my first farm, I wasn't going to think we'd have $150,000 armory, right?
Sure.
For the safety of the farm. I wasn't thinking that we'd own, 400 cows. I wasn't thinking that, we were going to have, our own solar grids and our own waste disposal and our own quarry, right? For construction and like just all of these different things. But as it's continued to grow, it just kind of continues to compound and build upon itself, which is, I mean, it's almost like a life of its own. You said, I see things in advance, and I don't know that I always thought I saw things in advance. Right. But like somewhere, like I just, like, how your mind fires, I'm sure your mind does, right? It's almost like fireworks going off. Like there was some point in time in like the last decade of my life where like when it came to business and real estate, like the fireworks just kept going off, right? And I started listening, and I started listening, and I started doing them, pulling in more data and more information, and I kept listening. And then I found really incredible people to work with, right? Then my team members and people, right, that could implement, right, those fireworks that were going off for me all the time. And so then I was able to continue to create more and more opportunities because I was around such incredible people that could help me implement, that could help me build the things that I was seeing. And so it's like I sit here right now with like Patrick, he's director of like all of our media buying, advertising, and different things, right? And you know, he's a 24-year-old, I would call him a 24-year-old man, right? Can't call him a 24-year-old kid because he's a 24-year-old man, right? Like he played baseball for me years ago when he was a kid, but you know, he stepped in and he's done more than, like, I've had like 6 other people go through that position over the years, and I've had other people who said they were going to do a job, but he came in and he does a job, right? And he does it to an elite level. And like, but that's throughout my business, throughout my company, I've been able to surround myself with like these powerful, incredible people. And I think that's kind of a philosophy of us as a company. Like a few weeks ago, we were able to offer health insurance to all of our people and pay for 75% of all their health insurance, right? For all of our people that work for the company. And like, that was a proud papa moment because
Yeah.
I was able to take care of my people, but because the reason I was able to is because they've taken care of me, which that mutual relationship is because we've been able to take care of our investors,
That's
right?
great.
And that's
Yeah. It
our
sounds like you're taking care of investors, and in turn, you know, you're taking care of your employees.
and don't get me
I
wrong,
got
I don't live in a utopian world, right? I mean, I'm saying, not saying shit's not hard. I'm not saying we don't work our asses. I'm not saying
Yeah,
stuff doesn't go wrong, but we do it regardless, right?
definitely.
Regardless of the what ifs, we do it.
So I gotta say, between myself, Sam and Johnny, the other guys on the show, we're coming up on 200 episodes, and we're just like, there can't be any more investments that we can talk about. And then, you know, I have you guys on. We're just gonna talk about a REIT, and then it goes into all kinds of other stuff. And it's different. You know, everything's different, and there's so many ways to invest money. And you've been crushing the returns. I wish you the best of success going forward. And I want to tell people where they can go to check out more about you. I think you guys set up a special site for us. It's go.raddiversified.com/boss. So rad is just RAD. So raddiversified.com/boss. There is a waiting list, but I think Vanessa told me she's going to let our listeners kind of jump to the front of that list so we can get invested as soon as possible. Anything else you want to tell us about Rad, Dutch? Or
Yeah. So for you guys, we've removed the waiting list for the Like a Boss people that come in, and so they'll be able to immediately invest. So
awesome.
that's really cool. What else would I want to tell you? I mean, I tell you, my business partner Amy, right? We haven't shared much about her on the phone, but just so you guys can understand, she's like a boss, like the rest of you. For a long time, she had a tattoo on her that said "Boss Lady." So
Well,
that's
why aren't we speaking to her, Dutch? Get out of
right.
here.
Far more attractive, right? Right. She's an absolute, you know, amazing, incredible person. So as you guys check out her stuff, you'll love to hear from her. She's deep into her why, but deep into being a strong, powerful businesswoman. So, you know, I can't do anything without shouting out to crazy praise to my business partner. And so, between her and then I have my wife Vanessa, who helped me first found, right, my first real estate business before she retired and went into full-time efforts into philanthropy, right? You know, those are so much gratitude anytime I talk about the things we've created and the things that we're doing to those two powerful women. So
Awesome,
got to give
Dutch.
that
Well,
shout, man.
I love your passion and your energy and your attitude. And I think if your staff's got half as much as that, you guys are doing pretty well.
Man,
Thank
did
you
we fly
again.
through this thing quick or what?
Yeah, we're overtime actually.
Wow. Oh, we were
But
just
yeah,
flowing, bro. Well,
thank you
good.
so much. That was great. There's a ton of stuff on their website too, so check it out. raddiversified.com/boss. Learn more about Dutch. He's got some examples of the properties they're looking at, and more about that Survivalist Project as well. We'll put all the links in the show notes. You can check it out in the podcast notes. With that though, Dutch, really appreciate the time. It was great talking with you.
All right. Well, to the boss world, you know, I appreciate you guys letting me share with you, and we'll talk to all of you soon, man.